Well, here we are back for part 2 of our review and critique for the images turned in for the Heiku assignment. We have 4 more to go, and then we'll be done with this. Again, we've got some awfully good stuff, so let's jump right into it. Right off, we've got this really cute shot of this little kid. And if anything ever talked about the innocence of youth and the fragility of it and how quickly it's going to change, a portrait like this can do it. The expression, everything on his face is just charming, including what looks like a droplet of milk or something that's around his lips. The only thing I would do with this one is I think it's light in the tones on his face. I'm losing some of the detail in his face, and I would like to put those back. I think that the rest of it is really pretty good. So let's try a slightly different technique just so you can see another way of going about this. But it's going to start out the same way with a duplicate layer. And in this case, on this top layer, it really wouldn't matter in this case which layer I use. So I'll just use the top. I'm going to go up where it says Image, Adjustments, Curves. Now, we've been all through what this curves dialog means, what it represents, how this is the representation of tones in the image, shadow tones down here, highlight tones up here, and this axis, the bottom, the x-axis, represents the tones in the picture now, and the y-axis represents the tones we wish to have in the output. So what I want to do is I like most of these lower tones. I don't think there's a problem there. I might vignette this a little bit, but that's a separate issue. All I really care about are these tones. So if I hold down the Alt key and press it, see the little line that's on the curves line? That's where that tone is. Let me pick another one, a shadow on his nose. So they're all up in the upper registries of this. Down here, we're down in the lower tones. So what I'm going to do is go grab this and bring this down a little bit. But unfortunately, when I do that, it also drags the bottom down, which I don't want. So I'm going to grab it here and bring that back up. And now, if I look at the preview, I brought the background down just a little bit, but I've brought the skin tones down to where you can really see the detail in them. I could bring this now back, the background back up. Let's look at it before and after. So I've just been able to bring his face down. I've done this without having to mask it because I have simply played with the tones in that area. So I'm going to say OK. Now my safety net is there. There's my before, my after. I like the tones in that face a little better. So now I'm going to vignette this just slightly. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. And now we'll do a standard vignette. We'll go up to multiply. Bring that back. That's a little too much. Okay. Now we'll grab our rectangle tool. I'm still at the 250 pixels that were used for a shot in the part 1 of this. I think that'll still work. I'll leave that. Now I'll make that a layer mask by clicking on the layer mask tool. And I'm going to invert that mask. And there we have the background darkened just a little bit so this face really stands out. If we wanted to, we can adjust the amount of that vignette simply by adjusting the opacity of that layer. So now I'm going to flatten all of that. We'll do a quick snapshot to see what we've accomplished. There's where we are now. There's where we started. So I think we've improved that a little bit. So let's go on to the next. Okay, here's an interesting shot. A leaf. The backstory for this is that when Megan shot this, the only trees around here, around this scene, were evergreen trees, pine trees. Where this leaf came from is an unknown, because it is definitely not from a pine tree. So it's interesting, this pretty gold leaf against this very cold ground, whether it's a rock or log, I'm not sure what it's sitting on, but it provides a real contrast to this cold looking background. It's a very nice shot. I might trim off a little of this. I don't know if we need all of this side or not. I think perhaps I like the way she's led a little bit on that side, so I'm going to leave some of that. I think the only thing I would play with, and the correct term is playing with it, because I don't see much else to do with this. Maybe bring the tones down a little bit to see if we could put a little more tone in here. But what might be interesting is to cool down these background tones. So I'm going to create a duplicate layer, and on this background layer, I'm going to simply turn it bluer. Color balance, and in the shadows, which is what most of this dark tone is, I'm going to add a little coolness to it. Just that change in tone brought everything down a bit. So now I'm going to go back to this top one, make it a layer mask, same trip as always, and using the black brush, with this set to normal, I'm down to about 30%, which is fine. Now that blue contrast to the yellow does make it stand out a little more. Now I'm going to see if there's anything I can do. I'm going to flatten this a bit to bring that snow in. And I'm going to do it the same way that we did with the little boy's tones. All of this mid-tone is good. Let's see where this highlight is. It's right up in there. None of this is below the middle, so I'm going to lock these midtones into place just by clicking on it. That means they can't move. And now I'm going to bring that down just a little so I've got a little more tone in it. So I think that looks a little better, and we'll go ahead and keep that one. Again, an interesting choice for this, a nice photograph on its own. You know what I might do? I'm going to do one last thing. I'm going to trim this down just a little. There we go. Cool. So let's see the next one. Here we have an interesting shot of a pier. This one again is talking about how things are impermanent, how everything is attacking this pier, the water that's flowing with this long shutter speed, and the barnacles and the growths that are on it are also slowly rotting it away. The problem is they're in shadow and we can't really see what's in it. So the only thing I'm going to do is to lighten this a little bit, lighten the parts of it that are down in here. So what we'll do is our old standby screen layer. Oh, look at all the detail that's in there. we'll make this a layer mask, and because I only want to erase these parts, then I'm going to do Control-I to invert that mask. I'll need to pick up a white brush, and with that, and I'm going to leave this set down just where we had it, to about 30%, because I want to do it a little at a time. Let's make it a little bit smaller for over here. You probably can't tell, but I am doing multiple clicks in this area to successively lighten this even more. So we really get a sense of all these organisms that are on this old wooden piling. I don't recall there being much in any of those. Yes, I can hear somebody wondering, you vignetted everything else. Why didn't you vignette this one? Because I think this works pretty well as it is. Let's test that theory. The neat thing about digital is, if you're not sure, test it. So I'll do a multiply layer now. Ooh, that's kind of interesting all on its own. Let's bring this down just a little bit. We'll make a layer mask. We'll invert the mask. And now with a very large white brush, we will darken that a little. Well, you know what? You might have been right about this. Maybe that does work better. It doesn't detract so much from the pilings. Cool. Good call. Let's take a look at our before and afters here. There's where we are now. There's where we started. And we made that out of it pretty quickly with some really simple moves. Most of the edits that I've had to do on your guys' stuff has been incredibly straightforward and easy. So let's take a look at our last one. I think it's the last one. Well, here we have an interesting seascape shot of a deep evening. Well, Stephanie, who produced this shot, said this old pier out into the water, and by the way, this is not here on the ocean, it's on a lake, but she said this really reminded her of that poem about footsteps becoming that of the sea. The only issue I have with this is the sky is so washed out, and there is so much of it. We've made it virtually half of the shot. Our horizon line is right square in the middle. And what that normally would mean is that each of these has equal weight in it. I think, personally, this part is really the shot. But let's try to look at it a couple of different ways. For one, let's see what happens if we just get rid of some of that sky. And that means we could bring this in a little bit. This in a little bit. We still have kind of a panoramic shot going. Now this starts to take on a whole lot more interest for it. So personally, I think that's going to help us a little bit. We still have to work a little with the sky. So now what we need to do is bring that sky down. The problem is this isn't going to work as well as it would on your full resolution image because it's compressed. And being compressed to submit, I mean, that's fine. That's what I asked you to do. But it has really created a lot of banding up in these areas. If I look at this with the levels, you can see all of the places up in here in the highlights where it's really banding across that. That's what these little tiny jumpy spikes are all doing. So we'll try anyway. So we're going to see what happens if we do a multiply layer. Well, there's a little more there. Let's try a layer mask. I want to use a black brush with this. And erase through. I want to leave the sky. Now, remember what we can do? If we duplicate this layer with the mask, we duplicate everything. So let's try this. Let's take this and duplicate it. And lo and behold, our sky is getting darker. Let's do it again. Cool. Now we're beginning to really feel this sunset. And we could continue this or back off. The cool thing about this is all we have to do to go back is this, or we can then adjust the opacity of the one layer that maybe went a little too far. Now, I think if you did this with the full res shot and you didn't get all of the compression artifacting that you're getting up in here and over in here, that you could make this really work a whole lot better. But this makes for an interesting shot. Nice, cool shot. So that's it. That's what we've had turned in so far. Guys, again, have done a great job. I'm really looking forward to seeing the finals. This has been a fun semester for me with you guys. You've really done some exquisite stuff. So let's go back now to the final module, and we'll chat about what's upcoming in your last week.